Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, July 18th, 2025, and today we're talking about selling excess produce, power to the people, but for real, and it's Feedback Friday. So let's do it. All right, fabulous Friday to you all. I hope everyone has had a great week. I hope the bounty has been bountying. I got more lettuce in the ground this week, which is nice because I got a lot of lettuce out of the ground this week as well. So that needs to be replenished, and it got watered in really well last night from some rain. So shouts to that. And we are entering that period where lettuce is painfully hard to grow through every step of the process and simultaneously high in demand. I maybe also smashed the teff cover crop down and planted some watermelons in there for goofs. I didn't kill the teff, but I did smash it. No idea how that's going to turn out, but that experiment was just asking to be trialed. I mean, it could turn into an absolute mess in a month, so please don't take this as a recommendation for growing anything, but it looks just lovely. Teff may be my new favorite toy. We'll see. I've got some other trials with it around the farm, so more on that soon. Anyway, it is Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we discussed using the ground up rock material left over from drilling a well, and I liked this from @SplittingGiblets, who writes, quote, "I'm glad you mentioned a little hesitation in amending that rock dust from the well core. I'm an environmental scientist who works in abandoned mine remediation for the state of Arizona. I want to caution people from using rock from non-tested sources. What makes waste rock dangerous is the increased surface area, which increases the leaching of harmful inorganics, such as heavy metals. These inorganics are harmless when in the earth, ubiquitous and coupled to other materials in a way that prevents redox reactions or buffers them. When pulled to the surface and broken up, suddenly a lot of material begins to oxidize at once, allowing harmful minerals to precipitate out into solution, leading to what is commonly referred to as acid mine drainage. I realize this person's well isn't mine, but the process is the exact same. What we would do is perform a SPLP test on a composite site of the material to determine leachability and what all is leaching out of it to decide what best to do with it. Depending on the mineralization in the area, they could at best be applying expensive nothingness to their soil and at worst be poisoning their soil to dramatic levels in very, very difficult ways to correct," end quote. Okay, well, I think getting stuff tested before adding it to the garden doesn't seem like the worst advice here, so good stuff there. On Tuesday, we talked about several things, but the thought experiment of farmer royalties definitely dominated the conversation. Lots of a diversity of opinions on this. I liked this from @InBarS Microgreens, who wrote, quote, "I think royalties on produce introduce a more complex bookkeeping environment than many farmers would want to entertain, and produce is far more perishable than literature." Did you hear the story about the 140-year-old overdue book returned to the Minneapolis Library? So if our product wastes in the walk-in, no royalties? No thanks. Just pay us a more fair price, end quote. Fair, but also the farms I think this applies to are less like produce farms and more like fiber farms. But I agree, it's complicated pretty much any way you look at it. @JSunshineJoel, maybe I got that right, wrote, quote, "I don't know about royalties on the products made from our produce, but I'd like to see the growers listed on the packaging or website. That would look good for the manufacturer, proof they use locally grown ingredients, and for the farmer, advertising if anyone else is looking for a local grower for that kind of crop. When we sold honey to a restaurant in Durham, they did a whole feature on their social media about where they got it, how fresh it was, and how they were using it. It was very good press. We didn't even ask them to do it. They just did since it made them look good," end quote. Yeah, I mean, I think if you were buying local produce, that's a win-win for you anyway. May as well tag the farmers and give them a shout. Helps everyone. My name is not Corey, so I'm assuming this is not Corey. Quote, "I used to work for a malt supplier in Texas, and we knew the grain growers firsthand most times. We made sure they got plenty of the delicious beer they helped grow, and therefore make not quite financial, but a friendship nonetheless," end quote. Okay, yeah, I think an exchange of product can be a fair kickback, and in fact, most farmers, when they go to eat at the restaurants they supply, for instance, often get the hookup there, which is cool. In fact, we still get the hookup at some restaurants that we haven't supplied in years. So more of an in-kind royalty of sorts, I guess. And always appreciated, especially because, restaurants don't have the best margins either. Anyway, more comments on that than I could ever get to. So take a minute and read through there over at the YouTube channel if you're curious. Blockchain comes up a couple of times. Our British friends seem particularly opposed to it. Lots of interesting tidbits there. On Wednesday, we discussed freezing compost, land management, we can see from space, and bindweed. On the bindweed front, I liked this from at Muddy Puddles Farm, who wrote, quote, "Bindweed, yuck. I've had it in 2 gardens. It takes relentless constant vigilance. As soon as you see top growth, remove it along with as much root as possible, then cover it immediately. Check back, keep taking the top growth off. Gradually, the plants can only grow weak yellow leaves. Keep going. It only takes a day or 2 in the sun to recover." End quote. Thanks for that. Now, we also talked about the need for better large-scale land management in limiting growth, and I think this illustrates something I've also observed at Mother Hubbard's farm. Writes, quote, "My town has a mall that has been closed and degrading for years. Instead of utilizing the land, they keep clearing more land / woods for stupid stuff like storage units. Makes me insane." End quote. Indeed, a town we used to live in now has a Kroger, and it's literally right across the street from the old one that is now kind of left vacant or has been left vacant for years. And honestly, it may still be that way. The new Kroger is now atop of some of the best farmland in the state. So that's cool. Great work, everyone. I also discussed this issue with renewables and at a bunch of numbers and letters. Wrote, quote, "Oil is not, quote unquote, fossil fuel. It regenerates. You really think all this oil we have used is left over from dinosaurs?" End quote. So although technically oil can regenerate, it currently regenerates at, based on various estimates, about 10,000 to 80,000 barrels per year. Emphasis on the per year part there. Now, in the US alone, we currently use roughly 20 million barrels every day. Emphasis on the everyday part. I'm no mathematician, but even if that number of barrels naturally produced is off by a billion per year, which is not likely to, given how oil is made, it would still be profoundly minuscule in comparison to how much oil is used in a year in the United States alone. So if someone wants you to believe things are all good on the oil front, because it is technically a natural product that bounces back or something, they probably have a barrel of oil to sell you. I actually am going to use the third segment to talk a bit more about the power stuff, so I'll save a comment or 2 for that. Then on Thursday, we talked about farm resiliency, and I liked this from at Telker Barris 748. Sorry, Telker. Quote, "You know you're Australian when you get a flood in the middle of a drought and then the drought continues. The only difference the flood made was to wash your topsoil away. A long enough drought will kill off the grass and dry out the roots so they don't hold the soil together anymore. Anyway, yes, prepare your farm for every disaster you can imagine. When bad things happen, not only do other people not have the resources to help you, but they need the food you're meant to be producing. Drought, flood, wind, volcanic winter. As a farmer, you need to be ready to handle any of it." End quote. Thanks. And volcanic winter may be a tough one to prepare for, but sure. Yeah, preparation is the tough thing because you are preparing for chances, not inevitabilities. The nice thing about the weather right now, I guess, if I'm looking for a silver lining, is extremes are slowly growing in probability. So it no longer feels like a potential waste of money to prepare. It's just, part of it. And you touch on a point that deserves more attention than I can give it here at the moment, but farmers and gardeners are such an asset to society. Agriculture is increasingly automated, and in so doing, and by that I mean in so automating, we are losing the knowledge of how to grow food. So farming and gardening serves a community, but it also carries on important knowledge of the techniques, but also knowledge in the seeds and knowledge in the culture. It has a value beyond food that we don't honor very well as a society. Anyway, good stuff as always this week, y'all. Up next, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, should we drop prices because we are overloaded with a product? BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. If you're listening to this, you probably found 5 rare minutes to breathe, but what got pushed back further down the to-do list to make that happen? If it's your CSA newsletter, you're not alone. Farmhand's new newsletter builder was made for busy farmers. It automates weekly emails, drives add-on sales, and makes it easy to keep your customers in the loop without spending hours behind a screen. It launches this summer, but our listeners can request early access now. Visit farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Chris Smith, who writes, "Hey Jesse, thanks again for answering all of my questions so far. I'm wondering what to do with a glut of a crop where I'm producing more than I can sell. Would trying a temporary price drop make sense? Looking for a temporary alternative outlet seems out of reach for me since I'm only doing this on a part-time basis. Any thoughts? What do you do if you have too much of one thing? I was also just wondering about inserted ads that have been coming up at the end of the odd podcast lately. Just wondering if that was part of being on a new host or something. While I don't mind the sponsor segments, I'd be curious if you would make an ad-free feed available for patrons. I was also wondering if you had ever played Dungeons & Dragons or any other tabletop role-playing games. I feel like a lot of your weekly stories could inspire a lot of fun adventures." End quote. All right, thank you. Great questions here. To the ads question first, if you're listening via podcast, our host adds, like inserts ads like at the end of every podcast. YouTube does the same thing, I believe. We could have them insert ads at the beginning, in the middle, but we try to reduce our ad interruptions as much as we can afford. So getting rid of them is something we could do theoretically, but the reality is that we can't totally afford to. Now, we'd love to get to the point that we can offer an ad-free version to Patreon members. That is like among our goals, but the challenge there is finding the extra time to produce another version of the episodes. It doesn't sound like much work, but with every episode or with every version is all the editing, uploading, all the input into the feed and all that stuff, which are time consuming, and time obviously has a cost. Like I said, though, it is a goal of ours. So I don't want to rule it out for the future. It's a good goal, and I appreciate you all putting up with some of the ads while we try to grow this thing and make it viable, which is always a brutal daily challenge. In short, hopefully one day we can do that. Okay, to your main question, at times when you have a glut of something and you don't necessarily have the time to find a separate outlet, what do you do with the excess produce? Well, a temporary price break is fine. It just depends on the market. Some money is generally better than no money as long as it's not costing you more to package the product and distribute it in labor than you would get if you were just to cut it all into a bin and dropped it off a food bank or let a gleaner organization come get it or whatever. In other words, don't lose money to sell it at a loss. Also, sometimes price breaks don't totally work, so I wouldn't harvest it before you know the customer is going to take the price break. An example of this might be something perishable like arugula. Maybe you have an extra, 20 pounds or something that you'd like to move, but that doesn't mean the chef you work with can all of a sudden use an extra 20 pounds of arugula on there for their menus. So a good idea is to always have an additional outlet that can handle that extra, that bonus. A CSA can be a good, option for that. I know that comes with a lot more work, but that can provide some sort of outlet. The bags of arugula in that in this example might just be bigger that week for the CSA, or a farmer's market where you can take extra produce and even sell it in bigger bags. I like the idea of complementary markets because the reality, try as one might to really refine what we're doing, the reality is that just farming is weird, and it can rain at a farmer's market one week, so you have too much of something, it's et cetera, et cetera. It's nice when you have a midweek CSA to handle that produce, or maybe you've given eggplants 2 weeks in a row and the CSA is looking a little wary at the sight of more. That's when it heads off to the farmer's market solely for a couple weeks to give them a break before another round later. Or maybe you have a farmer friend who can help you move it. You sell it to them for a cheap price, or maybe you work out some sort of consignment deal where if they sell it, then they pay you, and then you figure out another way to help them later. But of course, your question was about doing this without another market, and it really just does come down to what the outlet is currently that you sell to and what the product is that you're trying to sell. But generally, I have no issue with rewarding customers with the occasional price break. Most businesses will understand that sometimes things go on sale because you have to move them. Nowhere is that more true than in the perishable goods business, i.e. farming. Again, though, just make sure you are not losing money in the deal overall, doing more work than is worth. Oh, and to your last question, I did not play Dungeons & Dragons, but only because my mom thought it was evil. And I think that Netflix documentary Stranger Things proved her right. So, touche, Mom. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll bring the energy. Sort of. Be right back.
Hey, Jesse. Brian here from Snowflake Farm. We're down in Southwest Virginia with a view of the beautiful Clinch Mountain, growing vegetables for our local farmers market. Just put some beets and carrots in. The summer garden is coming to an end, and we've started putting in stuff for the fall. Couldn't do this without your help. Thanks a lot.
All right, so I want to talk about energy usage and how we need to look at power, energy, non-renewables, etc. going forward. I'm going to use this comment from @StefanR570 to illustrate some of these points. Stefan writes, quote, I have traveled to about 20 countries around the world, and the United States has the best energy and electric production infrastructure that I've encountered. Our electricity is on pretty much 24/7 except for hurricanes. Not so in other countries, even in Europe. Plus, our electricity is much cheaper. In Germany, as an example, electricity rates are double or to quadruple of what I pay. Friends of ours have a rate that is exactly triple of mine. Others have rates quadruple or double, depending on how lucky they got with their long-term rate contract. And Germany produces a lot of electricity with solar and wind, which have turned out to be a lot of problems, and they are ugly to look at. Plus, their recent government decision to get rid of their nuclear power plants has caused a lot of problems, even though these are carbon neutral. I agree that we need more renewable energy sources, but it has turned out that they are very hard to build due to constant lawsuits by environmental groups. It takes a couple of years to actually build these projects, but the permitting and lawsuit process takes 2, 3, 4, or more additional years to get through. For decades, we faced opposition to building new nuclear power plants, but now everyone, seems to have realized that these are very environmentally safe all of a sudden. Dope. I like your farming and market gardening shows, but your politics are not just unrealistic, they ignore the facts on the ground. It's not enough to complain and make unworkable solutions. I'll get off my soapbox now and put on my asbestos suit. End quote. Great stuff here, Stefan. Stefan is a good commenter, and I like the pushback, so don't hesitate. But I'm going to rebut some of this because I think it's important we understand a few things about power. First, I am by no means an expert on European power, which, stop it, I know, surprise. But the prices are largely driven by the cost of fuel from Russia, which has spiked in price since the war. So renewables are actually keeping it cheaper than it otherwise would be. However, use of large-scale renewables for power generation is relatively a new concept compared to other forms of power generation, and I absolutely applaud Europe and other countries for doing so much work on replacing other forms of energy with renewables, leading them closer to energy independence. The rollout has not been perfect, and all the needs are not yet met, but lessons are being learned, and future iterations will be better and more efficient for it. In fact, that is what we're seeing with nuclear. It isn't that people were like, oh, gee, this stuff is safer than they told us. No, it's just that they've improved the process over time after some trial and error, though I should say, somewhat ironically, I suppose, nuclear power plants are struggling to cool themselves because the warming climate is making the water they cool themselves with, well, too warm to actually always be effective. So anyway, with the nuclear power, just like it can be with wind, hydro, and solar, these will continue to improve and be more efficient if we are willing to try them, or more importantly, if we're willing to allow for some, let's say, growing pains. Energy independence does not mean just using all of our energy resources like our oil reserves and drilling/mining, public lands, that sort of stuff. That's not a plan. That's a Band-Aid. And it's a bad Band-Aid. It's a Band-Aid that causes more scars. To the thing about environmental groups stopping renewable energy projects, although I'm sure that sort of stuff happens, you know who really hates wind and solar projects? Wealthy people who think it's, as you said, ugly, and would prefer that their energy stay in poor regions where they don't have to look at the mountaintop removal and those communities stricken with losses from black lung, or the wells polluted from fracking, or to look at the steam billowing out of the large, sprawling power plants in rural areas. Absolutely nothing grinds my gears more than people who want abundant energy but just don't feel like they should have to look at what our cheap energy costs us. I do agree with it's not enough to complain and make unworkable suggestions, so my workable suggestion is to put the environment and ecology and renewable energy at the top of what you vote for and mean it. Demand the shift from the employees you put in office, which is what politicians are. They're your employees. It brings to mind this other comment I saw from @abarnhart1679, probably not the year they were born, but maybe, who wrote, quote, I'm not sure the problem is that enough people don't care. I get what you're saying completely, but plenty of people care about the planet, but the powers that be don't seem to want much to change, end quote. And I agree with that. People do care, but they need to follow through on it. Exit poll after exit poll in basically every election, regardless of what people say they care about, people ultimately vote for who they thought would be better for the economy. And for good reason. People's economic situations suck right now and have been getting worse as the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But at some point, we have to start recognizing that the environment is the economy and start voting for that. That is both an actionable and workable suggestion, and at very least, it's a suggestion we try something different because what we've been trying, it ain't working. Again, I'm not unrealistic. To me, unrealistic is thinking that we can go on like this and that everything will just, turn out fine, that the system will just randomly self-correct, or worse, that it's already gone too far and we shouldn't do anything about it. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results isn't the definition of insanity. It's the definition of America. We used to be the country that prided ourselves on what we could do. Now, we just accept that some things are out of reach, even try to talk people into thinking they are being unrealistic for having an optimistic vision for changing things, making things better, and having a future. And instead, we prefer to just cede the future to apathy. That, to me, is insanity. That seems like a fun place to end it. Thanks to Stefan and all the other commenters this week. I like the challenge too. Appreciate that. Otherwise, it's the freaking weekend. So let's go enjoy it, or work it, or improve it, or just wait until Monday, which is the actual weekend for a lot of farmers and cooks and others. So don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No Till Growers. Also shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat, one of these, not one of the FCC hats. You got to get that from Cincinnati, at notillgrowers.com, or a copy of the Living Soil Handbook to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of July, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to our weeklies, Kyle Richardville, Patrick Weaver, Alex and Oliver, Bill King, and Chris Yates. Really appreciate you all. Weekly support is huge. And a new earthworm, Alan Nixon. Shouts to you, Alan. All right, so back to our story. Morning of the date where the attack is slotted to go down, our poor protagonist, who you will remember wakes up with a different profession embedded in his brain every day, this particular morning wakes up a dancer. Specifically a professional ballet dancer. This, of course, happens sometimes where, like it is with athletes or musicians, for that day, he understands everything about that profession, but lacks the actual muscle memory to utilize that information. So, in effect, this dude suddenly understands more about dance than almost anyone in the world, but cannot actually execute a single plie or rond de jambe or with any finesse. But he knows what he can do. He can go there and he can wing it, because that's his only option. So he heads to the place where he knows the assassination is set to take place, and he sees a movie set with a crowd waiting outside. This makes sense. The actor is an actor, so he's probably acting. Then our hero goes to the fence where the security guard is waiting and says, "Hi, I'm the ballet coordinator." The security guard laughs at this, and I'm quoting here, "You're the ballet coordinator for a space movie?" Our hero responds affirmatively, but the security guard checks with his superiors and turns him away. Just then, our hero sees the actor, the Mark, walk by. The actor has a bloody patch mark on his chest, just right here, near his heart. And then he hears an assistant yell for a new shirt with a squib and to go ahead and reset the assassination scene. And it suddenly occurs to him that he'd been duped. He hadn't been an assassin after all, but some sort of supporting role, like whoever was going to shoot the lead in this particular space movie. A method actor. Anyway, embarrassed, he begins to walk off. When he hears a gunshot and a scream, he chuckles and then thinks, "What an unfortunate develope," and laughs about that because it's a ballet thing. Anyway, it isn't until later that he reads the news. And that will end our week. I hope you all have a great weekend. Thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you Monday. Bye.